Welcome to the Artificial Cities podcast, where we will talk about artificial intelligence, technology, policy, sustainability, and so much more. Let's grow one conversation at a time.
South Fulton County, well, we have a lot of great attractions. Of course, we have Wolf Creek Amphitheater. We have the Tom Lowe Shooting Range, which a lot of people from all over the state come and participate in. We have a lot of nature trails, and a big thing right now is rock climbing. So we have the Cascade Nature Preserve, where a lot of organizations from all across Georgia are coming to enjoy our rocks. And I never knew it was a thing, but now I know it's a thing. So that's one of the things. And a lot of rock climbing, it's a lot of land, a lot of hiking. So great little city to be a part of. Chattahoochee River, so fishing, all of that good stuff.
It's a good attraction.
Yeah.
The hooch.
The hooch. I am Carmalitha Gumbs. I am the council member for District 2 in the new city of South Fulton here in Georgia.
Beautiful. Okay. So as a councilwoman, what is your job? That's a big question.
That is a big question.
So let's start off with the process of becoming a councilwoman.
So to become a councilwoman, you have to be elected by your neighbors and your peers within the community. We started as a new city in 2017, so we finally got the referendum passed, and I decided to take a leap and run for city council. And at that moment in time, I had to go out and campaign and talk to my neighbors and see if I was the best fit for our district. And they elected me to represent them on city issues. Some of the things that I deal with on a day-to-day are definitely constituent concerns and issues such as roads, traffic lights, land use permits and things of that nature, but also just making sure that we maintain our integrity as a community, making sure that we're dealing with things such as short-term rentals, also to a lot of infrastructure that is coming into the city, just trying to make sure that it's strategic as far as our growth and making sure that it's not very overwhelming for our citizens. Of course, we're a new city, we're growing extremely fast, but you got to have a balance, and I think that's one of the things that they've elected me to do, is to do that.
Beautiful. So do you think that there is a disconnect between the constituents and their ability to communicate their problems in their everyday life to get that information to you? Is there a bit of a disconnect just on a technological scale of where people know how to contact you about the problems around them?
I would say absolutely. I think before coming, and you're going to hear me refer to this quite a bit, before becoming a city, we were disenfranchised. That means we were unincorporated for a while, so we didn't really have an elected voice. We had a commissioner, but again, they were managing the whole entire county. So at this point, our residents have been disenfranchised for such a long time, so it's now they want. And trying to manage those expectations have been incredibly hard as starting a new local government. We, as council members, have started our own newsletters while we were waiting for the city to get up to par, as far as staffing, bringing on our own communications team. We've elected and did our own social media pages. We've also started social groups where residents are in different groups able to talk about the issues and concerns. And what it has done is that it's created a narrative of maybe some misinformation to the residents that are not always accurate, but they also use that as a way to gather information on what's going on in local city government. I think that has been incredibly tough. We're now turning a curve and we're building the structure for where residents need to go. We have a nice platform where they know they can go to the website. They know that they can actually reach in and dial into our communications department. We have a 311 system now, so we're building it. But I think residents were yearning for information for so long that they just didn't know where to go. So they went to social media, and it then began to cast. Sometimes it can be, social media has its devil parts, sometimes it's good and sometimes it's bad. It's a way to get information out to the masses, but what we've learned is that sometimes the information that's out there is not always accurate, and it causes a negative cloud on some of the things that we try to do as elected and even in the city. So that's what we've had.
So from what I understand, we are trying to utilize current technologies, and we've had some success, but there seems to be a bottleneck in terms of how that information is actually being able to be translated into functional, some type of function out of the information. So that really falls back on your partners, you know, your public works, your contracted engineers with the city government. And do you think that there is a lack of accountability, and then that blame gets misplaced more or less back on the elected officials who are doing their best to put people in the right positions, but because of the way these non-compete forms with government to private contracts are written, there seems to be a missing piece of how we can actually bring about the change and eliminate the waste that's being emitted through the public funds.
Well, I definitely agree with that. I think, and to be quite honest, I think one of the mistakes that we've made becoming a new city is inheriting a lot of what our previous predecessor, Fulton County, did. Of course, when you bring over staff from another municipality, you also bring over those ideologies, those thoughts, and they don't always align. And I think that's where we kind of had a misstep. Of course, in 2019, we went to go and certified ourselves as trying to be a smart city for the city of South Fulton. We want to be an innovative city, and I often kind of laugh about it sometimes. I don't know if you remember the movie In the Heat of the Night. I always think about Mayberry. I don't want a city that's Mayberry. I want a city that's innovative, that we're using our best technology to be efficient, cost efficient, and to just make sure that we're a safe city. And I think that's what happened, is that we inherited that thinking, those same practices and policies, and we brought them over to the city, which kind of set us back, because when leaders are in a comfort zone, they don't really like to move. So I think bringing innovation and technology was not a comfort area for some of these leaders, and they did not embrace it. And now we're kind of turning the curve in that, and hoping that, with our new leadership, with our new city manager who has embraced the technology, that we're moving towards that. We can't say that we'll use drones, but then we get the data from the drones, then what do you do with it? And I think that's what we've been doing, is that we've implemented some great technology strategies, but where's that data going? What are we doing with it? Are we just holding on to it? So how does that really make us efficient as a city, a smart city? So
this really brings into the concept of artificial intelligence, and being able to process data and put it in and layer it as well. And the most effective way to do that is by crowdsourcing information, which really turns the scale of turning us more into almost more or less a direct democracy, where we have the technology, where we can see the inputs and outputs of our governments, where before that just wasn't feasible, that wasn't plausible. But now we can, and you have, one thing I saw on one of the South Fulton group pages was someone complaining about getting a speeding ticket, and they were like, kind of speeding ticket, of course I'm going to pay it, but I wish they'd fix our roads. But they don't understand how government funding works from inputs to outputs, and that the police department they're not raising money for the road construction per se. They have their input of where their budget is actually going to a particular output.
Yes.
And so, developing AI that can actually register where these inputs and outputs are going, and being able to allocate, the cost of, all right, well, if it costs $2,000 to fix this patch of the road, and this company's receiving $6 million a year, how many roads can we fix with that?
Exactly.
And so creating transparency and using technology for that so do you want to speak on behalf of how technology, artificial intelligence, and having a smart city isn't just about controlling. It's not about controlling the people. It's about making a more honest system, where the constituents have more integrity, and so do the public officials.
Well, I definitely agree with that. I am very big on transparency, and just like with our open government, that platform that we've developed, we want to be able to provide residents with information right at their fingertips. We're logging in the data, and then on the back end, a resident should be able to log into that system and see what's going on with the financials. We want people to embrace that because, again, I could get a call and be like, oh, you all spent this amount of money on such and such, but did you check into the system and see exactly where it went? So those type of things are important, and I think residents need to embrace it. They don't really understand government. They don't. They're just like, oh, well, they're raising all this money on these cameras. What are they doing with this money and blah, blah, blah. But there's layers to bureaucracy, as you all know. But as far as with the technology, it helps us to be more efficient. And the whole thing with the speeding cameras, I mean, people have slowed down almost to 80%. Even riding through those school zones, even though I've been blessed not to get a ticket, people are creeping through those areas. So it is impacting behaviors. It's also making people start to think more, and then holding them also accountable instead of calling and saying, oh, the police are doing this and then the police are doing that. But the revenue that comes off of that is where we're going to be able to decide how we're going to impact the quality of life for all of the residents here in the city of South Fulton. So I think as we continue to move the needle on technology in those areas, I think that we'll have a more efficient government. We'll be able to direct where funding will go, and residents will be able to have a more stronger voice in directing that as well. So that's my thoughts.
I like that. And I do want to kind of tack on to that specific example, because whenever you can have cameras replace physical people who are pulling people over on the side of the road, making a dangerous situation for every driver out there, putting the police officer at risk because he's walking up to a strange car, you actually inherently lower those types of interactions while simultaneously making safer roads and making people feel safer getting in their car. And I think that is a fascinating concept of building technology as a way to make interactions more efficient, more effective, and change behavior in a way that helps everyone.
Yes.
And makes more responsible behavior, because I think there's a problem that people have whenever you talk about oversight and people feeling like they're being controlled. But there's a big difference of being responsible and making good choices and actual true overstepping the government.
Absolutely.
So how in a couple small words, I kind of want to ask, for artificial cities being able to communicate with the city and bring more data to the public officials, how has artificial cities been able to kind of help South Fulton in its developmental stages right now?
Well, we're in the very early stages. Again, it's preliminary data. What it has kind of done is make our departments kind of step up a little bit, because this right now, artificial cities, is being garnered by a resident. A resident that's in a community that is concerned about his community and understands the value of data and how it can drive decision making. And I think once we get to a point to where all of our leadership is on board, I think it'll be a fascinating tool to, cast across the entire city. But as of right now, I think, like I said, it has made us want to really kind of step up our game, understand the value of technology. We just was talking about our police department. As a new city, of course, we're growing our police staff, and residents are used to seeing police officers. They want to have them in the community. They want to have them standing on the corner, or just that visibility. But through technology, that visibility can be there, and then feeling a little bit, more safe. And that's one of the things, we don't have a lot of police officers on our force at this point in time to where we can have police officers, just sitting and giving out tickets. And that's why the value of technology is so important. But again, being the artificial cities component is making us be more aware as a local government of what we can do and our capabilities, and being able to grow and move forward to that.
When is your reelection?
My reelection is in November.
Okay.
November of 2021.
So if you want to just have a mentioning of, just so everyone knows, elections for South Fulton, is it just for council members, or?
So it is the mayor. So we have the mayor seat that is up. We also have District 2, District 6, and District 4. So the even numbers, we will be having our seat up. But there will also be some items on the ballot that will, residents will need to get out and vote for. So I do encourage all residents to go out and vote. This is our future. Again, your input for the city is important, and we want to make sure that you're valued. So I do encourage everyone to go out to the polls. But on November the 2nd, 2021, we will be voting for your mayor and your council. I love, so I'm a freak when it comes to like dialogue. I can just, bounce off of stuff like that. So I appreciate that, yeah.
Good.
But I'm excited about it, and we just need to continue to move our city. If we can get our infrastructure in place, I think, we could talk smart cities all day, but until we get our infrastructure in place, that's going to be the big thing. So.
Well, it's a difficult area too.
It is.
Because you've got the airport right there. You have all of just the metropolitan Atlanta just sitting right on top of you, and this area has been very suburbanized in its development.
Yes.
So I'm sure that's nice for traffic flow, but that comes with other problems as well.
It does.
So you have transportation issues whenever you suburbanize, and so there's a lot of moving pieces.
All of the issues that you're hitting on are what we're experiencing, and just trying to get it up and going. If you don't have that smart city mindset or thinking, how do we impact, change with data, it won't. You got to have the leadership and the vision for it. So I think that we're finally moving that direction. So.
Am I able to comment on it then?
Absolutely.
Yeah. No, I was going to just say, yes, you did great. Very, very stimulating conversation in terms of hitting on all the points versus being really emotional about when you get that camera ticket versus thinking about. I think a lot of times in our society, we, to some degree, we're all guilty of it, but I think we become so selfish about things, whether it's COVID or whatever, and we always feel like we're the victim.
Yeah.
Versus what you hit on. What was the purpose of the cameras? Were the cameras there to attack people? Was it there to, no, they became an issue, and they were implemented because of loss of life. People forget that. It's so disheartening. And a lot of times someone has to lose their life, and then we want to do legislation. Yeah. We want to install cameras, or we want to promote things more. That shouldn't be that way. It should just be, what does the data tell you?
Yeah, how many wrecks were right there before that one person died?
But you always find, like you mentioned, the person going out there, they've complained more about the cameras than some other things that maybe they should be complaining about. But I think that's only because you're hitting them like in a wallet. And so,
But that's how you impact and change behaviors. Hit them in that wallet, because $300 tickets. Now I see those people that have gotten those tickets. They just creep through those speed zones. They're not taking it for, And like you said, it is a shame that it had to be a loss of life. It took forever to get the data, so we had to use that as, okay, we've lost 2 children in this intersection, in a school zone. So that's what we had to campaign off of to get the cameras, versus using, we've had this many wrecks here, and even with GDOT, so we've had many violent crashes from Old Fairburn Road all the way down to Campbellton. And my thing was, give me the data. How many car accidents have resulted in deaths from this time until this time? And they finally gave it to me, and then they saw that, okay, this is what happened. But it took them like 4 or 5 weeks to pull that information up, which more lives were lost in that process. But they ended up seeing the difference. Now you got the rails that are coming in that section. You also have the change in the lights, and people are more, keen to slowing down. But you have to have the data in all your decision-making points. And
for me, it's you know, it's not fast enough, but,
Mhm.
you know, it is what it is. But I was gonna also mention that I hope Garrett mentioned that, your particular interview, it's just not local, because Artificial Cities were like, almost like connected to the World Economic Council,
Yes.
which has like
Okay.
about over 7 million followers.
Wow.
So whatever
And I didn't get my makeup
whatever
professionally
you
done.
are saying
great.
about the city of South Fulton,
Mm-hmm.
if a person was even thinking about moving here, traveling, or this and that, it's things that need to be said. And you know, I think it's always better for all of us to definitely give this light of like, these are things that we're actually doing to improve our cities.
Mhm.
It's so much easier to, you know, talk about the, you know, the negative, but I just really think that we dwell, human nature, we dwell on the negative. Remember that so much.
Well, that's one of the motivators is running away from something.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, so that's the thing, so thank you so much for,
Welcome.
Make
Well,
time to do this.
before our previous city manager left, I was trying to be more like, you know how Atlanta has smart ATL? So I was trying to really set up us a department that could be more of an innovation department where it would encapture like smart cities. So I'm going to push that back again and see if, you know, we can start kind of moving some people to really start focusing on smart cities and how to adopt those things. And maybe we'll start getting some more traction as well.
yeah.
And maybe you can apply in the council.
Yeah,
Or maybe be our consultant.
Our thing is we have so many different like directions that we can go, but
Mhm.
I'm more than thankful to the neighbors and the city thus far, people who wanted to participate like in the pilot and so
Yeah.
forth. And even when we kind of shut it down, people were still emailing me and calling me, I can't go in there and I can't submit this was now. They're like, hey, you know, this is not, you know, go to ClickFix or something, right? Go over there or whatever.
Mhm.
But I'm just thankful that people were willing to like participate, and we can avoid those situations that you mentioned where someone has to experience a bad situation before they implement something.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Well, you know, in that conversation, we're still working on how we're going to partner with cities.
Okay.
So, you know, I think it would be great if we continue dialogue about, you know, how we can help, whether it's consulting, implementing the technology directly,
Mm-hmm.
or even if it's us coming in and having a conversation and helping map out the professionals that you need, and that becomes, you know, one of our functions as a company.
Absolutely.
So us, you know, having the technology is in and of itself, you know, one of the programs we can do, but, you know, beyond the technology, us being able to help and advise, and, you know, advise even having a certain type of civil engineer for this job, and
Mm-hmm.
you know, being able to allocate some type of way that we can just continue to build a relationship and make South Fulton basically the city upon a hill, because, you know, it's not the ideal place looking back where you'd want to take and move, but with the implementation of what you guys are doing
Absolutely.
with the development, making a smart city, making it safe.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's what you want for a family to move into, is a safe place.
Mhm.
And,
So our 3 pillars right now is public safety, of course, our parks and recs, and then economic development. And I can see how smart innovation can just kind of capture all 3 of those, you know, making sure that we have like broadband and making sure that we're able to have Wi-Fi in our parks, all of our parks, or even throughout the city type of thing, to make it more friendly, and then also too easier for economic development, especially with our community improvement districts, focusing on beautification. There's different ways that we can kind of implement the smart cities, and of course, public safety right now, we're attempting to do that, but you know, we got the drones and all other stuff, but it's so much more we can do to be more cost effective in that, but that's going to take time, consultation, and then just kind of showing people, you know, new strategies. So
And I was gonna, you know, we actually do intelligent cities, but
Mhm.
we're gonna talk smart cities with everyone else, because
okay.
that slogan that they put out there a few years ago is that people can like relate, oh, smart, but we actually build intelligent cities.
Intelligent.
Which is, there's a big difference between smart and intelligent in terms of how like devices
Okay.
are used.
Well, I want to be an intelligent city.
Yeah.
and design of the future progression of later implementations of, you know, having more or less a master plan for
Mm-hmm.
where we can build the communities and on down the road, instead of it just just fixing the problems now where we can take communities.
I love that. Okay, I'm glad you explained that to me because I've just been saying smart cities, smart cities.
Yeah, because that's what they kind of sell. That's a but that's a good
Hot
advertising.
word.
The cliche, the how.
Yeah.
Okay.
But everything that you do, even when it comes to our lives, you want to collect data, build algorithms,
Mm-hmm.
but eventually you want things to become more self-learning.
Yes.
When you start changing, like, say, like behaviors, what's the impact of that?
Mhm.
Like you said, people flying through like the school. It just doesn't change the school zones. It makes them more aware of most things.
Yes. Okay.
Okay, so whenever you're doing that, there's a long-term, like, say, like effect, and people become more intelligent about what they're doing.
Mm.
You know,
Putting flashers on the road so that way they can subconsciously know cameras on this road. I see the flashers. I'm gonna
Yes.
hit my brakes now.
Okay.
You know, so not just having the city smart, but having it continuously adding more and more ideas to work with the human. and
Okay.
How our brains work.
Okay.
it will also actually even like impact things like car theft,
Mhm.
car break-ins. There's a subliminal part that people don't even get, that when you don't feel so free to go zooming through this area to area, or a camera, or as long as it's that, it changes even like the behavior of crime, like related to cars even.
Yeah.
People don't even see that part. They
Oh,
just think-
that's physics. Atoms act differently under observation.
Mm-hmm.
So humans are the same exact thing.
And you know, we
We'll
get
act
a lot of backlash when we talk about installing cameras. And I'm still trying to understand why we get so much backlash on
I
that.
can give you, well, I mean, you touched on, you know, some of it, but when I used our company to get the cameras into our community, right?
Mhm.
One of the biggest things was like my privacy.
Yeah.
You're invading my privacy. And I think I may have kind of joked offline and said, well, if people are coming home at 2 or 3 a.m. in the morning that shouldn't, we're not trying to capture who's coming and going. We're not trying to capture you doing something outside of what you shouldn't be doing. This is not a
Mhm.
social experiment. The cameras are there to prevent something, and usually that's something that's harmful,
Mm-hmm.
not to capture that something that you're doing, something socially that we're trying to control. And that's what I've seen. It's like people don't want to be caught on camera doing something that they could be, but the cameras are capturing license plates, make and model of a car or something like that, not capturing what you're doing in the car,
Mm-hmm.
not capturing who you're talking to on the phone. Now,
Where you're
that's,
going.
those
It's
are
not
the
tracking
fears.
you.
People don't want you tracking where they're coming and going daily.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not sure how you may relate to that, but the human psyche is like, I don't want you to know what I did today. And that's what I get from a lot of the conversations and the complaints. Is like, why are you capturing my plate on my car at 3 a.m.?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, were you weren't speeding, were you still in the car in the community?
Or maybe they think that, you know, a husband or might call and be like, "Kay, can you not tell my wife that I came in at 3 o'clock in the morning?" Or something. I don't know.
People don't want you to know their whereabouts, but I'm saying if you don't want people to know your whereabouts, don't carry a cell phone around with you.
Mhm.
Number one. Number two, don't
That's
drive
true.
cars.
Sure.
Don't carry a cell phone and don't drive a car. Ride a bike and don't carry a cell phone.
But the
But
way
they
our
want-
world is changing now, you're always on video. That's how I feel
I think
every
the
time.
satellite's watching us
Yeah,
100% of the time.
all the time.
You're not going to get away from it. And I think one thing that is important to understand, especially on a political, more or less public official arena,
Mhm.
is what you hear is not necessarily what is most concerning, what is most important. What you hear is who's the loudest.
Yeah.
And you're gonna hear the loudest
Yes.
of people on both far ends of the spectrum. And if you look at statistics, you know, you have that 98%, and you have the top 2% and the bottom 2%. That's who you're really hearing. And so, you know, artificial cities, like one of the things is to really quiet those outer extremities and really consolidate, you know, where that emotion is coming from and bring it into where the middle 50% of everyone's agreeiness lives.
Okay.
And a lot of that is narrative. You know, interviewing people that have been hurt, you know, in a certain area to push your narrative of like, hey, we need cameras here, you know, like this person's whole livelihood, their whole education was ruined because this semester their car got broken into. Here's their story.
Okay.
Stories are going to be how you touch the human compassion. It's how you reach people, because it makes people have the ability to put themselves in those shoes, to see that perspective, to understand that narrative, to then process it properly.
Got it. Okay.
Otherwise, they're just hearing noise and trying to filter through that noise on their own, which is what you end up with is what you initially said. You get misinformation through that. People
Well,
don't
we
know what
have
to
a
believe.
lot of noise, and we have not been very good at controlling our narrative. And that's one of the things that we have to really work on, is controlling that narrative. So.
Thank you so much, because it's posted out there on Next Door. Next Door is the last place you want to post all your dirty laundry. And you know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
It's a
you're
lot,
right.
because now you don't even own it anymore.
Yeah.
And you know, some company in San Francisco, which owns Next Door, is now managing, you know, like the city of South Fulton's data. That is just, and because the people are socially uneducated, they go out there, and even I would go out back in the day and try to, but I gave up. I don't go there anymore because it's not healthy. It doesn't help where I live. And so I think a lot of my neighbors started getting the same message, because I started voicing, like, you know, if you really don't like something, maybe try something else. But giving your life story and how horrible things are here on a public forum is, I just don't think it's the place for it, but that's my own opinion. But like you said, you have those two extremes, and I think what's healthy is what you just mentioned, which is, you know, we're trying to do with all our future podcasts. You know, we're bringing in all the heavyweights, you know, to talk about solutions.
Well, that's how the news media picks up on a lot of our stories for the city. They listen to the residents putting that information out there, and they come and they like, okay, well, we knew that you felt this way about this. So all of our dirty laundry is on these social media. It's already out there, and the news media just knows where to go and get it. And that's how we get these salacious stories on, you know, WSTV and all this other stuff. So you make a very valid point. And our economic development also is hurt by that as well. So
there's a system I think a lot of humans miss out on, and it's the scientific process. And complaining is the first step of acknowledging a problem. So when someone's complaining, they're saying, hey, I found a problem. Here's my problem. But the problem is that people don't know where to take that problem. So they go from person to person, and they really become a negative wormhole of just human sadness. But ultimately, you know, they're really trying to fix that problem. They're worried that it's going to happen to someone else, and you know, there is some selfishness involved with it in terms of just you know, my problems. But you know, I really believe it's more than that. I really think it affected that person so much they're trying to share that information. And if you know, these social media platforms are only inciting more anger, and they're programmed to get those clicks out of anger instead of programmed to get clicks out of intellectuals submitting responses and crowdsourcing, you know, local intelligence. And because, I mean, when you turn the block, I guarantee you've got 10 engineers in your neighborhood. You probably have 3 architects. You probably have 5 GCs. You probably have enough intelligence in your neighborhood alone, you could rebuild the entire city. And so, because we have a limited amount of workmanship power because of these contracts, because of the fact these solutions aren't being brought up, the city government is stuck. Because your job isn't to be a general contractor. Your job is to get advice from a general contractor, and you can't do your job right if you're only getting one, you know, seed of value or one solution being brought to you by one person. Because intelligence is a network. It's not from an individual neuron. It's not from an individual person. It's a system. And so, you know, being able to have a system that receives the problem and puts it in a place where the community can fix it. You know, that's one of the lineages of it not just being a smart city, but an intelligent city. Because it produces outcomes.
I could listen to this all day. This is,
But you're great. I mean, you like I said, the short period of time that we have interacted, I know that you get it.
Yeah.
And I know that you can embrace change. And even when it comes to what I say, little companies like a little software companies like ours and so forth, we're gonna be fine no matter what. But we know that cities have a life of their own, and we know that typically a city is almost like a machine. They don't like to take a lot of risk. They're gonna go with the Microsofts, the Googles, the IBMs of the world, when they bring, because we know exactly what we're gonna get when we sign a contract with IBM.
okay.
And that's it. So a lot of times there's very little room for the little guys out there running around who wanna do trash or do potholes or do lighting where it's like.
The basic.
Yeah, there's no room for them. So we just turn it all over to IBM. And then they just do whatever they do, and they go from city to city. And so I know, but I know that whenever you can involve more people in the community, as you were saying, like you already have, maybe some engineers in the city that work with, the more people you can get involved, especially when it's almost like, some people are willing to do it, and you're not cutting a check for them.
Yeah.
Yeah, they just want it. I mean, it's going to increase their real estate if their roads are better out front.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So there's there's always more than one or two or three or four ways of doing things. I just think that like communities are only as strong as the people in it all the times. And I think that's where we get lost. A lot of people say, I pay property taxes. Then they go home and they want a turnkey solution.
Yep.
And then they say, Gumbs is not doing her job. And I get lost in that one because I go like, okay, I'm like, how about cutting your grass? How about not parking your car on the street that's been sitting there on flats for like months? And there's this self-like determination that has to come out of like the community if you want. But typically, what I kind of hear is these cameras are ruining our lives. People aren't doing their jobs. This is that. And
there's no accountability to the individual.
And so for me, living in various cities and coming from the Washington D.C. area, working in Silicon Valley for almost 20 years, I saw the startups. I know how things work. I've seen the tech companies. I know what they do. I like hear this, but I will tell you, as long as you stick with the data and the facts, right? It's hard for them to debate that.
Yep. Data and facts. That's
It's
true.
hard. They can be emotional all they want. Show me alternative data. And when you hear that pen that doesn't, when they say the pen, you don't hear when it drops, this is what I found out since moving here, is when I present the data, it gets very quiet.
It gets quiet.
Yeah.
Yep, you got to. So my last question for you guys is, what city do you feel is doing it right? Like something that we can really model, and I could say, let's look at this city. Where can we showcase?
The city that I will be retiring to, Peachtree City.
Peachtree City?
Yeah.
Very intelligent city?
Well, because it was built master plan from the ground up with those biking paths, golf cart paths, 80 miles of it, walking, jogging. I mean, you've been there, right?
I've been through Peachtree City.
Okay. They've been set up for success. They were fortunate from the ground up to build it that way. And they have stipulations already built into the city that if you're going to come in there and build even, you got to meet certain standards. And whereas here, when you're taking over what you said, this unincorporated area, the cars and the trucks, they pretty much drive it. How are you going to come in here and build golf cart paths?
Yeah.
Put in, 80 miles of jogging, and it's just going to be extremely tough. But the reason why I said Peachtree City is because it's the closest
one. Okay.
But right in there, you would be in a place like, say, Vienna, Austria, which I went there. Those sidewalks there are as wide as our streets because they don't care about cars in the cities because they know what the cars do. They have one lane for biking, one lane for family, traffic, whatever, and a third lane, I don't know what it's called, but their streets are as wide as sidewalks. The streets where the cars drive on, they're very narrow, and there's certain parts of the city where cars are not allowed. That's where we're gonna be moving to. It doesn't matter how much people argue with you about, that's just noise.
Okay.
It's like me, like I said, like debating someone 10 years ago that electrical vehicles would be the future, and they says no way, this and that. They don't, like, the battery life doesn't last long enough. They had all these assessments, but it doesn't matter, because at the end of the day, you don't have unlimited oil in the ground, and you're destroying the planet. And I'm just telling you where you're going to go with it. So as you look at today, right, you have, and this is getting a little bit off subject, but you have counties, you have states passing legislation now that by the year whatever, there won't be, well, here's one. There's several cities in California that said you cannot build any more gasoline stations. So we know that's it. No more gas. So what are they going to be building, right? The governor of California passed things by the year 2030. They only want electrical vehicles on the road. And I mean, that's all vehicles. So when you think about even your own city, you have to think about not next year.
The future.
Yeah, next year is fine, but...
Well, and see, local municipalities, they get stuck fixing their current problems that were backlogged for 10 years.
Yes.
And the even just the idea of implementing, trying to plan 10 years ahead, the master plans that were written 30 years ago for the design of these areas are far outdated, and they're not being updated appropriately. So there's a lot of poor design in that. Now, Gary's technology in artificial cities, it more or less focuses on a macro, accumulating the data and implementing it. My focus is more on the micro, working on smaller communities, working on neighborhoods, working on, in terms of one niche I'm working with is sustainable farming. And geo-sourcing, where local gardeners and local farmers can upload their produce so the community can access local produce directly.
Okay. Now that's something that we've been really trying to build. We have a network of farmers in the area, and so those farmers have been coming to the city and asking the city to pretty much support them financially to help them build out this program. And of course, we're limited on what we can do with taxpayers' dollars. But that would be a great idea to kind of help them expand that program and reach the residents. I could probably, tap Gary into some neighbors that are farmers in the city, and then that way y'all can connect and maybe do something like a pilot program through the Artificial Cities program. So I'll make sure that I'll connect you. I know even just with Fulton County, they called yesterday because they're thinking about donating some money to those farmers. So if there's a way that you all can kind of help to make sure that residents do have equal access to that produce and things of that nature, that'll be helpful. People do want it.
And now you're building an intelligent city.
That's it.
When you start going down those avenues and things like that, I mean, just trust me. And again, when you travel the world, and I've traveled other places, I get a lot of my ideas from all over the world. I just don't sit at home and watch TV. I actually travel, and I take the best of what I see, whether it's the Middle East, whether it's Africa, whether it's Europe, Asia. I learned so much. I recently learned a lot from a software developer I have. He lives in Vietnam, and he just kind of like said all of that business that was going to China, he says China's hiring them to do a lot of stuff. A lot of business is going to Vietnam because, well, you know what I'm saying. So I was like, yeah, that's what I said. That is right. I noticed that, I'm dealing with most of the ones from Vietnam and India. So whatever you're trying to achieve and do here, anything that's forward-looking, and you said this, remember many years ago, like you said to me, you said, saying, I'm looking for people or organizations who can think outside the box. So that caught my attention. I said, yeah, I get that. Or you can follow the traditional, as you say, whatever the Southern thought process of the good old town that they've always done. You have one sheriff and have one corner store. Everyone drives, I don't know, but whatever it is, and everybody's whatever, right? And I can't see how we could survive as a city where you're gonna get left behind. And you're like in competition. You're in competition for not just people like myself, but families. They're looking for where are we gonna move our family? Where's our kids gonna go to school?
Yeah.
And you're like in competition with these other cities. And I hate to put it this way, everybody wants to get, like the top dogs to move to the cities. And that's even deeper. So when you mentioned there about examples of certain cities that I think are doing it right, and I believe that you might be on the same page, but I think you agree that Peachtree City would be one, because when they designate all these paths, the biking, jogging, golf carts, walking, all that, and
it's safe, and there's cameras, and there's call boxes every 10 feet,
Yeah.
You will see it. And I'd imagine that they annexed all the neighborhoods that were bringing in property taxes whenever they established South Fulton. So they'll probably had a big developmental plan of, and I would assume that's where the suburbanization was really launched, was to try to get some property taxes to use in the investment. But see, that is missed, and people don't know that, and people are impatient because if they don't know, I mean, you ever been driving somewhere you don't know when you're going to get there, and you're 5 years old, and you're like, we there yet? We there yet? I mean, that's how the constituents feel. They're like, are the roads fixed yet? Are the roads fixed? It's like, hold on, guys.
They're like development. They think that development is supposed to happen, in just a year, 2 years, but typically it takes development, 10 years.
Yeah.
Now with technology, it could be a little bit faster, but usually
or incentives like that bridge they put up.
Yeah.
I mean, if it's for the right purpose or the right people, they're gonna work their tails off and put it up overnight.
I just think government does. It's always a snail-paced process.
yes.
And I think that there's ways to be more efficient. There's ways to, get things done. Like, it shouldn't take forever for somebody to go online and pay a ticket. It shouldn't take forever for that ticket to get in the system in order for you to pay it. And that's one of the things that, with our court system, taking a little time to get there. 4 years now. We should have been there, It shouldn't have to be where the officer writes the ticket and somebody else has to have a body to input that ticket, and then we got to get the ticket in the system, and then the back-end user has to pay it. That takes too long. The officer should be able to have something right there in his hand where he's writing the ticket, it uploads to a system, and then it's right there the next day.
You can opt in to go to court and fight it, or you can opt in to pay it right there.
And that already exists.
It exists, but not in the city of South Fulton.
Right.
So those are the things that we really have to, but we have to have that thinking of how to become an intelligent city. Like I said, we can tote it all day long, we're this and we're that, but if we don't have the infrastructure in place, that's just a play on words.
Yeah, and I've heard some of the slogans, and I'm hoping that we can have different slogans, whereas instead of certain ones I've heard, maybe like the smartest city in America. Trying to get you to the level.
I like the city upon a hill.
Yeah, I've heard some other ones, but I said, well, it'd be nice if they put some other words in front of it, which makes people say, hey, I really want to go there because they said the greatest quality of life or something like that. But so I'm just making a spin on Councilman Khalid there. So I said, I wish he put the word rich in front of it or something too. And so
the most moving city in America.
So that's the thing. It's not enough to say certain slogans. I think that when people are looking to move places, it's always going to come back to like that quality of life. And I just think people it always comes back to that, unless they don't have the means or resources to move to a place that has a better quality of life.
Yeah.
That's the economics part that we don't always talk about. There's people who might want to move to a better community, but they don't have the resources or the income now to afford to move.
Well, even if there are resources there, you got to realize, we'll build these parks, but then we shut them down for 90% of the day. These kids, sure, we built these parks for these kids and for even adults, but people are on a 24-hour schedule. Like, why aren't we letting these parks stay open and have, an ID swipe where your ID is registered to your jurisdiction and you have access to these parks 24/7, they're under surveillance, things like that, where it's not the lack of resources, it's just not a truly, it's not using resources to their full effect.
So the lack of knowledge of knowing what to do.
Or just lack of implementation of technology.
Lack of implementation. And that's one thing too that I think we also struggle with as policymakers. We write policies all day, but the real truth and the pudding in it is how we're going to implement it. When is it going to be implemented? So as a new city, we came in writing policies out the door. And now we're in year 4 and we're still talking about the same issue, but there's a policy on the book. Why hasn't it been implemented? So what we need to do is kind of slow down, take a second look. If there are these policies that we've put in play, maybe there's, something that we can tweak and take the time to implement it. And that's one of the things that we're missing, is that we want to be these overachievers, policymakers, yeah, but we have to implement. We have to. It's no sense of writing these long drafts of policies and then it just sits on the shelf and collects dust. It's ridiculous.
Sounds like Congress.
Mm-hmm.
In so many ways, but again, like I said, I do know that it's not an easy job that you do and so forth. I don't. Again, like I said, I'm glad that you do it. So no competition from me, because I know what I'm best at, and I work in those areas. But if you have those leadership qualities and you have the patience to deal with the far right and the far left and all other kind of stuff, God bless you. But we are thankful that you made time today to share your thoughts and so forth. We're hoping that this particular interview will touch the minds of people out there who may think they know what's going on or whatever, or may have even this narrow vision of what the city is about, what we're doing here, or even what your job is, what you're doing, right? We're hoping that this can change behavior via visually.
Gotcha. Well, I will definitely send you that neighbor's information, Willie Miller, and he can connect you with other farmers in the area, and you all can kind of figure out that part of it as well. So,
Good.
awesome. Well, thank you all for your time. I appreciate it. This was good.
Yeah, I appreciate your time.
Yeah, you get to be on the world.